Following the disastrously poor release of 1980's Gamera Super Monster, the Gamera franchise spent a decade in dormancy. The Showa-era films produced between 1965 and 1980 had gradually shifted toward child-oriented entertainment and lost any amount of prestige they once held. The series was quietly shelved until the success of Toho's Heisei Godzilla films demonstrated that kaiju cinema could still draw audiences in. Seeing an opportunity to celebrate Gamera's 30th anniversary, Tokuma Shoten chairman Yasuyoshi Tokuma initiated plans to bring the character back. In 1991, a short film titled Gamera vs. Garasharp was created for the Gamera Permanent Preservation Plan collection. 3 years later, in 1994, Daiei planned a comeback feature film called Gamera vs. Phoenix, where Gamera would fight a giant firebird. But the idea was soon dropped for various reasons, like budget and scheduling. This is where Shusuke Kaneko steps in. His path to becoming the director of this trilogy of films is absolutely fascinating, especially when you consider that he never went to film school. Instead, he got licensed to be an elementary school teacher. In an interview with Brett Homenick, he stated the following, quote, "When I was a school kid, I loved kaiju movies. In my 6th year of elementary school, Ultraman began airing. I was 12 years old. Nowadays, Ultraman looks like a childish thing, but at that time, it was science fiction. The situation was very science fiction. The criminal kaiju came, and Ultraman was the policeman. So it was a cool story for boys like me at 12 years old. I was so excited, but at that time, I didn't want to become the guy who made kaiju movies. I wanted to become a cartoon writer or novelist or something, but after high school, I wanted to become a film director, but the film industry was in a recession. No one was selected from the students, so I thought I had to get some kind of license, a teacher's license, just in case I couldn't become a film director. At age 28, I started filmmaking as a director. After that, I thought, what is Japanese entertainment? So kaiju movies came back to my memory after almost 15 or 20 years. In the mid-80s, videotapes began to be sold. So I went to a video store. I found a kaiju movie, which I loved during my childhood. So I started to think about making a kaiju film after I became a director." End quote. Initially, Daiei approached Shusuke Kaneko to direct a Daimajin film, but he felt Gamera would be a better and much more feasible project due to budget concerns. After all, the Daimajin films are period pieces, while Gamera can take place in the modern day. You wouldn't need these giant elaborate samurai sets and costumes. Instead, you can just have it in the modern day. But after this conversation, years passed, and after seeing Kazuki Amori's Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah and the teaser for Godzilla vs. Mothra, Kaneko became eager to direct a Godzilla film himself. He sent a New Year's card to Toho producer Shogo Tomiyama, expressing interest in helming Godzilla vs. Mothra. But Tomiyama informed him that a different filmmaker had already been chosen. When that news spread, Daiei immediately approached Kaneko again, this time to make a Gamera movie. Upon hearing the budget was only about $5 million, Kaneko joked that they should make it a comedy, but he ultimately accepted the offer and brought in screenwriter Kazunori Ito to develop the story for what would become known as Gamera Guardian of the Universe. Even then, the entire process of creating a movie like this with such a low budget was a Herculean task. Kaneko wanted to rebuild Gamera from scratch. That meant no stock footage, no camp, no recycled plots. He and Ito reimagined Gamera as a mythic protector who was grounded in realism, treating the events of the film like a national crisis as opposed to a spectacle. This involved storyboarding the film during the writing process while keeping the budget in mind. In that same interview with Brett Homenick, Shusuke Kaneko said the following about the writing stage of production, quote, "We had many storyboards with Mr. Shinji Higuchi. Mr. Higuchi wrote the Gamera parts. I wrote the human parts. We discussed the shots, what was necessary or not necessary. I abandoned many shots, so I think the budget got condensed." End quote. Someone that often doesn't get enough praise for his work on this trilogy of films is Shinji Higuchi. For those that may not be aware, before working on Gamera Guardian of the Universe, Higuchi was already well known in Japan's film industry for his work in special effects and animation. He began his career at Gainax, where he helped create storyboards and special effects for Hayao Miyazaki. There, he developed a reputation for his technical understanding of miniatures, motion control, and mechanical design. In the late 1980s and early 90s, Higuchi transitioned to live-action special effects. Working on miniature and storyboard work on 1984's The Return of Godzilla, Higuchi was then brought in by Daiei as the special effects director for all three Gamera films. Behind the scenes, Higuchi completely reinvented how kaiju effects were shot. Instead of relying on static wide shots and slow pacing like earlier tokusatsu, he adopted dynamic camera movement, low-angle perspectives, and realistic lighting to make the monsters feel enormous and physically present. He emphasized physical destruction, dust, and shockwaves to convey impact. Higuchi also worked closely with cinematographer Hajime Matsumoto and the effects team to integrate an eclectic mix of suitmation, pyrotechnics, CGI, and optical compositing in a more cohesive visual language. He often shot at unconventional frame rates to enhance the weight of Gamera and his many foes, and he pioneered composite layering that combined miniatures, matte paintings, and especially CGI. This was something that was nearly unheard of in the mid-90s, especially in Japanese effects cinema. His work on these films later opened the door for projects like the 2015 live-action adaptation of Attack on Titan and his collaboration with Hideaki Anno on Shin Godzilla, where he, again, served as special effects director and co-director. Released in March 1995, Gamera Guardian of the Universe marked a complete reinvention of the series. The film was a major success, selling nearly 1 million tickets and earning 520 million yen in rentals. It swept several Yokohama Film Festival awards and was hailed by critics as proof that Gamera had evolved beyond children's entertainment. When Guardian of the Universe reached international audiences through ADV Films festival screenings and home video, it quickly gained a cult following. Variety called it a lively revival of classic monster cinema, while Roger Ebert praised it for taking itself seriously.
It stirred up enormous nostalgia within me for the kind of good-hearted, goofy, preposterous tradition these Japanese monster movies come out of. I'm glad I saw it, I enjoyed it, and so I have to give it a thumbs up.
By the end of its run, Gamera's reputation had been completely transformed. Daiei's gamble had paid off, and Kaneko's team had set a new standard for modern kaiju storytelling. This is Gamera Guardian of the Universe. A freighter transporting plutonium collides with a strange floating island that soon drifts away and disappears. Meanwhile, an investigator and a naval officer are assigned to uncover the cause, crossing paths with an ornithologist who is studying mysterious flying predators known as Gyaos. When the island reappears, it reveals ancient artifacts and a stone inscription speaking of a protector called Gamera. The enormous turtle-like guardian soon awakens, battling Gyaos across Japan and forming a psychic connection with the investigator's daughter, Asagi. Researchers determine both creatures originate from a long-lost civilization, as one Gyaos evolves into the powerful Super Gyaos and devastates Tokyo. Gamera defeats it after a fierce struggle and then retreats to the ocean to recover, his fate uncertain. Gamera Guardian of the Universe is by far better than any Godzilla movie from the 90s. I'm dead serious. It blows all of those movies out of the water, which is pretty cool since Gamera usually plays second fiddle to Godzilla and is often stuck living in his shadow. Everything about this is such a massive upgrade that naturally adapts the Showa era movies while improving upon every element. The opening sequence immediately establishes this tone of mystery and tension. It has this cinematic quality that feels distinctly Hollywood, but not in a derivative way. You're not getting an Indiana Jones subplot at the start of your Godzilla vs. Mothra movie. But it understands how scale, pacing, and atmosphere play into a kaiju movie, and it does it perfectly. The composition of shots, the restrained use of music, and the sense of something intense waiting to reveal itself all build anticipation in a very fluid and natural way. It's the kind of opening that hooks you because it feels like it's holding back on purpose. You're aware a monster is coming, but the film makes you wait for it, which makes the eventual reveal just so much more effective.
What was that?
Gyaos' introduction in this film is genuinely frightening. Up to this point, we haven't seen any kaiju, and that restraint works to the film's advantage. Even though I already know what a Gyaos looks like, the lack of a full reveal turns the creature into an unseen threat, lurking just beyond the frame. And the glimpses we do get create tension in a way that full exposure never really could right off the bat. It's the same kind of fear that comes from knowing something is there but being unable to fully comprehend it. The pacing throughout this section and the film as a whole is downright masterful. The story moves quickly when it needs to. It doesn't linger too long on setup, but it also knows when to slow down. The quieter moments where characters stop to process what's happening give the audience space to just breathe for a minute. Hot take, but I really think that sense of rhythm is rare in kaiju cinema, where pacing often swings too far in one direction, where you get a bunch of kaiju action backloaded with the majority of those movies being just people talking in order to pad out the runtime. It never feels natural. It's always like, okay, here's all the human scenes, here's all the monster scenes, here's the movie. You kind of separate them and you get all of them at once. But with Gamera Guardian of the Universe, you never get that feeling. It all feels like one cohesive movie, and more importantly, it feels deliberate. Every scene builds toward the next without losing any momentum, which is a sign of fantastic screenwriting. What I love most about Gyaos in this film is how small scale and personal the monster feels. It's not destroying cities or toppling skyscrapers, but much like its Showa era counterpart, it's actively hurting people. I've said it before in prior kaiju retrospectives, but that intimacy is what makes the monster feel all the more terrifying. The creature's behavior feels so fucking sadistic, almost playful, like it enjoys causing pain. Kaiju are often portrayed as forces of nature that are totally indifferent to humanity as a whole, but Gyaos feels like a predator. It's aware of its prey and it goes out of its way to attack it. I really think it's that detail that makes it one of the most unsettling monsters in the entire series. Visually, Gyaos has never looked better while flying. Flying kaiju have always been hit or miss for me, especially in the Heisei era Godzilla films, where they often feel stiff or puppet-like, with monsters like Space Godzilla, Destroya, Mothra, Batra, all feeling very wooden. Here, though, the motion feels natural. The creature moves with weight and intent. The wings fold and stretch believably, and the cinematography captures its agility without betraying the illusion. There's a sense of realism to the movement that sells the effect completely. This feels like a real giant flying monster. It's so good. Another great moment is the sequence at the baseball stadium. It's one of the film's most inventive set pieces. I think using a sports arena as a trap for a monster feels absurd and brilliant at the same time. It's like something ripped straight out of a comic book. The spotlight scanning the night sky as Gyaos flies overhead creates an image that feels almost operatic. It's pure spectacle, but with a real sinister edge. The moment the roof begins to close, it adds a whole new sense of suspense because it's such a slow mechanical process, and you feel every second of tension as the characters race against time. On one hand, you could say that that moment where the roof takes forever to close is a bit of a plot convenience for the sake of making the sequence more suspenseful, but it's realistic. I couldn't help but think of my hometown team, the Milwaukee Brewers. I'm a Bengals fan too, but that's a different story. Regardless, the Brewers Stadium roof takes about 10 minutes to shut, and watching that sequence, I felt the anxious anticipation you get during a real-life rain delay. Except we don't get rain delays at Miller Park. We're not Wrigley Field. But, of course, here in Gamera, the stakes are life or death. There's a small but memorable detail during a news broadcast early in the movie where the anchor hesitates before saying, "giant monster."
Just minutes ago, a giant monster has appeared and begun attacking the harbor at the port of Fukuoka.
It's a very tiny moment, a very brief performance, but it reveals how people might actually respond to an impossible, incomprehensible situation. Details like that make this world feel alive, with characters reacting as individuals instead of just filling narrative space or being there to run away when the monsters attack. Speaking of, I've always loved those wide shots of people sprinting through the streets while a monster looms in the background. It's such a classic image, yet it never loses its impact. There's something almost mythic about the framing, humanity scattering like ants while something ancient and unstoppable towers over them. The scale of destruction in this movie becomes personal because you can feel the panic and not just see it. As the tension in the film escalates, the military steps in with a plan that immediately falls apart. It's another reminder of how fragile human control really is. The Gyaos escape, the traps fail, and the authorities are left scrambling. It's a very humbling moment, one that reinforces the idea that these creatures exist beyond human comprehension. You can't strategize your way out of something that isn't playing by your rules. And I think this also works really well just as a concept, right? Normally with some of these kaiju movies, human military people will come up with a plan that's so absurd and so stupid, and when it doesn't work, you're like, well, no shit. But with this, it works, it makes sense. Why not? Let's use a stadium to trap them. Sure. I think the unpredictability factor in this film extends to Gamera himself. Somehow this movie manages to make his flight mode, which is him retracting into his shell and then spinning through air, look really cool. On paper, it should be ridiculous, but the execution sells it completely. The effects team commits to the idea with absolute confidence, and it's that conviction that makes all the difference. Instead of feeling like some gimmick, it's this natural extension of his power. It makes total sense. The movie doesn't stop and go, huh, did you guys just see that? Isn't that lame?
Ghidorah, the one who's many.
What?
She's a gonorrhea.
Gamera's design in this film is, without question, the best the series has ever seen. Every design element gives him this primal intensity that never crosses over into cartoonish territory. He looks terrifying, but there's nobility in his movements that makes you want to root for him anyways. I think there's a real balance to having a cute but intimidating kaiju, and it's hard to pull off, and this movie nails it. Amid all the chaos, the film still finds time for humor. There's a moment where a man casually says it'd be cool if the monsters attacked Tokyo.
Will it attack Tokyo?
That would be cool!
You are weird!
And I couldn't help but laugh. It's exactly the kind of thing that I would say in that kind of situation. The same goes for the kid pretending to be a kaiju in the convenience store. These reactions feel honest because they reflect how fans actually think. Half terrified, half thrilled. It's the movie essentially winking at the audience, acknowledging the strange joy that comes with watching cities crumble on screen. The bridge sequence is another one of the film's most striking set pieces, both visually and structurally.
Yo, holy shit, he dead! Oh, he dead for sure!
The choreography is so unbelievably tight. Every movement is carefully staged to heighten tension, and the miniature work is nothing short of exceptional. You can feel the physicality in every collapsing beam and swaying cable. It looks so tactile and dangerous. The pacing of the sequence keeps you locked in, though the editing occasionally falters, because at times it borders on feeling very melodramatic, breaking the flow like something out of a Bollywood soap opera. Though I think the film's best aspect is when it shifts into something more emotional with Asagi's connection to Gamera. It's easily one of the most thoughtful creative decisions in the series. It's the spiritual bond that takes Gamera's old reputation as the friend of all children, and it reframes it in a way that fits this darker, more grounded tone. Yeah, he's still friend of all children, but it's just this specific child here, and in Gamera 3 you'll realize it's not really all children, it's just this one. Still, the connection feels sincere instead of being obnoxiously sentimental. When Gamera is hurt, Asagi feels it, and it's that shared pain that makes the relationship feel powerful. It's not really symbolic or anything, it's quite literal. He bleeds, she bleeds. The film transforms a well-worn idea from the 60s into something that carries real consequence. As the film chugs along, it visually keeps topping itself. The image of Gyaos perched against the sunset is painterly, almost romantic in its composition. It's one of my all-time favorite shots in any movie ever. Even beyond that, the low-angle shots during the daytime battle between Gamera and Gyaos are another huge standout. Shooting the monsters from the ground gives them a ton of scale and dominance without needing constant destruction. You can feel small just watching them. On top of that, Gyaos' death scene might be one of the best in any kaiju movie ever. The explosion is so massive, it feels dangerous to even watch it. You can tell it's a real detonation and not a digital effect. And I think that makes all the difference. It's so cathartic and horrifying all at once. It's a fitting end for a monster that's been haunting the film from the very start. And so as Gamera waddles back out to sea, the score swells with this almost Spielberg-like warmth. The melody sounds faintly like the Jurassic Park theme. It's hopeful and nostalgic and weirdly emotional after so much chaos.
He'll come. Gamera will come again.
And then the end credit song kicks in. And it completely blindsides you. The song is called The Myth by Bakufu Slump, and I'm not even joking, I think it was in my top 10 most listened songs on my Spotify Wrapped on like a yearly basis. Considering all the death and destruction that happened in this movie up until this point, it's absurdly upbeat. It's a full-blown pop track that feels like it wandered in from a Japanese remake of The Breakfast Club. But somehow, it works. It's so unexpected. It's so shamelessly catchy. I couldn't stop laughing. It's the perfect note to end on. It's so weird, but confident and pure. It reminds you of why this movie absolutely rules. Gamera 2 Attack of Legion from 1996 reunited the same creative team that brought Gamera back the year before. With a slightly higher budget and full confidence from Daiei, director Shusuke Kaneko and writer Kazunori Ito aimed to make something bigger, faster, and more intense. Instead of reviving another classic monster, they created Legion, an alien hive of insect-like creatures led by a massive queen. Yet again, Shinji Higuchi's effects team delivered some of the most ambitious tokusatsu work of the 90s. When Attack of Legion opened in July 1996, it outperformed the first film and earned critical praise. It became the first kaiju movie to win the Nihon SF Taisho Award, which was Japan's top science fiction honor. However, something that I found rather interesting is how Shusuke Kaneko doesn't consider Gamera 2 to be in the sci-fi genre. Sure, there's aliens and giant monsters, but to him, that doesn't automatically classify it as being sci-fi. He addressed this by stating the following, quote, "We didn't consider them science fiction movies. We didn't have that kind of an idea, but ever since the Godzilla movies in the 50s, many kaiju movies were made after that. They became their own genre. They are kaiju movies, rather than science fiction. In kaiju movies, some have science fiction tastes, but the genre itself is not science fiction. It's its own genre. Within the genre, there are science fiction leanings. There are fantasy leanings, but the kaiju genre is a genre in and of itself. The concept of science fiction started in America, because America is a young country. Japan has a long tradition, so it's difficult for science fiction to root itself in this country. The genre of science fiction in Japan was influenced by the US, so that's how it came to be. But it would probably be difficult for a country that has as long a history as Japan's to create its own version of science fiction on its own, considering the long history that it has. So, the first Gamera was science fiction. Gamera 2 was a war movie. Gamera 3 was a little supernatural. GMK had a supernatural taste with a war movie combination." End quote. By the end of Gamera 2's theatrical run, Gamera had fully shed his image as a knockoff of Godzilla, a second-rate kaiju. Kaneko's vision had elevated the franchise to the point where critics and audiences alike were comparing it favorably to Toho's Godzilla series, even saying that it topped Godzilla at his best. The film's success convinced Daiei to push the story and tone even further, setting the stage for a much darker and more emotionally charged finale. But before that conclusion, Gamera 2 itself represented the series at its most confident. A fast, intense, and technically brilliant middle chapter that expanded the scope of the world Kaneko and Higuchi were building. In 1997, a sudden meteor storm pelts northern Japan, with one massive object landing right near a lake. When two scientists investigate with the Japanese Self-Defense Force, they uncover no meteorite, only a strange plant-like organism and swarms of creatures. One of the scientists concludes that these beings, later called the Legion, rely on the pod to spread their kind across worlds. They do this through explosive seeding. As the Japanese Self-Defense Force prepares to destroy the alien structure, Gamera appears, wiping out the pod but being overwhelmed by the creatures. A towering Mother Legion soon surfaces, mortally wounding him. Revived by humanity's prayers, Gamera rises again, joins forces with the Japanese Self-Defense Force, and obliterates Mother Legion in a blinding plasma strike, thus saving Earth once more. Gamera 2 opens with a breathtaking meteor shower that immediately establishes a sense of scale and mystery. The sequence feels cinematic in a way that recalls the first entry in the trilogy. It carries that same Hollywood-inspired polish.
Get down!
Watching it in the middle of a Wisconsin blizzard made the experience strangely fitting. This is kind of like a winter movie. It's not a Christmas movie. Fuck off with that. But it very much is something you could watch during the winter and enjoy. I love the moments with the snow-covered streets and the faint blue light and the chill that runs through the entire film as it blends into one consistent mood. It feels so distinct from the first film. It's a story that feels frozen in time, with everything feeling just so damn quiet, eerie, and waiting to thaw into chaos. And trust me when I say this, every single installment in this trilogy feels so distinct from the other. The first movie feels nothing like the second or the third. You really can't say the same about a lot of trilogies that are out there in cinema. You just don't. They all kind of fit into the same feel and vibe and world. But here, it's so distinct. The cold and frozen tone shifts very sharply once the film moves underground to the subway sequence. It's a masterclass in horror, tension, and atmosphere. What begins as this ordinary commute transforms into a nightmare. When the attack happens, it's genuinely terrifying. The death of the train conductor is shocking, not just because of how graphic it is, but because of how sudden and desperate it feels. The gore lands with impact because it breaks the illusion of safety that the film has built up until that point. What makes the scene even stronger is how little we actually see of the Legion creatures. When we do, it's maybe an eye or like a spike or something. We can barely make it out. Their presence, much like Gyaos, is felt at first through suggestion, with these terrifying and ominous shapes moving through the darkness. You get these flickers of movement and that awful screech echoing through the tunnels, but that's it. Again, much like Gyaos, I think having human-level threats in a kaiju film adds a completely different kind of fear. The smaller Legion creatures move with purpose, and they hunt with intelligence, turning tight spaces into death traps. It reminds me of something out of Aliens.
What are those?
These sequences have a similar rhythm to a war film, but with the intimacy of horror. You get some phenomenal moments where the camera lingers on soldiers breathing heavily through their masks, lights flickering across their visors as they try to process what they're even seeing, let alone fighting against.
What in the world? What is that?
The design of the Legion creatures with those sharp limbs, the clicking mandibles, the insectoid precision, it all feels straight from the same creative DNA that birthed the Xenomorph. It's claustrophobic, it's tactile, and deeply unnerving, which is perfect for a horror monster. That's something I love about these movies too. They aren't afraid to dip their toes into the horror genre. Usually with kaiju movies, they like to kind of just be their own thing. But with this, you get some terrifying moments. Honestly, I love it. I want more of it. The only stumble in this stretch of the movie comes during the rescue operation in the subway. Instead of showing the chaos unfold in real time, the film cuts to a series of still frames depicting soldiers evacuating civilians. I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this, I thought that my Blu-ray that I had just bought, it's the Arrow Video one, I thought that it was skipping, and I was so pissed. But no, the choice is bad. It feels out of place. The stills really strip away the momentum that the scene had earned, making the moment feel oddly detached. It breaks the visual flow that had been maintained so carefully up until that point. For a movie that thrives on motion and immediacy, it's that brief lapse that just stands out to me and drives me nuts. It's like, why? Was it a budget thing? Because it feels like a budget thing.
You're gonna be fine.
Even so, the strength of everything surrounding it, from the direction to the tone to the atmosphere, it all keeps the tension alive from that point onwards. Gamera's entrance in the film commands attention from the moment it begins. The military's immediate decision to stand down and let him engage speaks volumes about the scale of what they're facing, and it also shows growth on the military side. They know that Gamera isn't really a threat to them, and that if anything, he's here to help. The staging of the sequence also works really well. The sound design is immaculate. I just love everything about it. I love the motion of the camera as it builds to the reveal of Gamera showing up. It feels monumental, one of the best entrances to any kaiju movie ever. But what follows is so disturbing. The moment where they swarm onto Gamera is one of the most disturbing images in any Gamera movie ever. It's nasty. Their movement is so chaotic but coordinated, like an invasive species overwhelming its host. The sight of them covering his shell and limbs is just suffocating to see. Gamera's cries sound like genuine pain. It's deep and guttural, and when his blood sprays across the buildings, the scene transforms into something even more horrifying and primal. The Sendai pod sequence continues that mood. The sight of dead Legion drones scattered across the cavern floor has a quiet intensity that's difficult to shake. Their twisted bodies form this grotesque landscape, and each one is a reminder of how overwhelming this infestation has become. The lighting gives the scene a dreamlike stillness, but there's nothing comforting about any of it. It borders on cosmic horror, evoking the dread of discovering a world that never belonged to us. And finally, you got the Legion Mother, which is a masterpiece of creature design. Every detail reinforces the idea that this is something alien, not of this earth. Its body structure, movement, and asymmetry give it this uncanny rhythm that defies human anatomy, or really any type of anatomy that we would even see here on Earth. The design team clearly understood how to make something both majestic and horrifying all at once. The texture work, the glint of light across its exoskeleton, and the controlled mechanical gestures of its limbs create this illusion of life that completely feels foreign. It's an original creation that never resembles a person in a costume. Because it kind of wasn't. Like it was, there were like two people in it, like one of those horse things, you know, where one person is standing up and the next one's like bending over and they're like the back legs. You get the idea.
Hey, this guy's fingering my asshole back here. Hey, knock it off, man.
The final battle between Gamera and the Legion Mother is so cool. The hits land with a brutal precision, and every sound effect just reinforces the scale of the damage. Segments of Gamera's shell tear away, he bleeds, the detail in the miniature sets amplifies that chaos. I love how the camera is moving around like crazy, it feels so fluid. The editing keeps the rhythm tight while letting the audience feel the exhaustion in every motion. It's a violent, exhausting, and beautifully choreographed display of destruction. Seriously, the effects in this trilogy reach a level of realism that few other kaiju films have matched. The explosions feel heavy, the miniatures crumble naturally, and the creatures move with believable mass. What gives this fight its staying power is Gamera's persistence. Every movement communicates struggle and determination. He feels worn down, yet unwavering, fighting through pain with a sense of inevitability. You get the idea. He is outmatched and he keeps going, and that just makes you enjoy it even more. The conclusion lands with the weight of a legend being fulfilled rather than just a battle being won. And when the dust settles, the tone shifts back into something completely unexpected. It's warm and inviting. Gamera returns to the sea as a calm melody plays, soon replaced by a cheerful pop song. I love it. I love how this is just a consistent thing now with these movies. It's great. We just had an insane horror movie with blood and guts and like war, and now it's like, yeah, just a fun J-pop song, why not? It feels almost like the world of this film is just exhaling after everything it's endured. The song might be misplaced tonally, sure, but I find it to be very endearing. Ending a film this bleak with something so unapologetically joyful gives it a human touch through all the chaos that we just experienced. By 1999, Shusuke Kaneko and Kazunori Ito set out to end their trilogy with something darker and more ambitious. Gamera 3 Revenge of Iris took a sharp turn from heroism to tragedy, asking what happens when humanity starts to fear its own protector. Kaneko described the film as supernatural in tone, a mix of myth, trauma, and kaiju warfare seen through adolescent eyes. But the production wasn't easy. Studio executives interfered with casting and script decisions, forcing Kaneko to rewrite portions himself. He clashed with producers over keeping Ayako Fujitani's character, Asagi, arguing she was vital to Gamera's moral balance. Kaneko said the following about this behind-the-scenes conflict, saying, quote, "During Gamera 3, there was trouble because the president of Daiei chose another actress. The Daiei president, Mr. Yasuyoshi Tokuma, was a great guy, but he ordered us to use Nozomi Ando instead of Ai Medea. So we were opposed to that order, but by creating another role, we were able to overcome the difference. Another producer didn't like Ayako Fujitani. Ayako's character is to connect emotionally with Gamera. That was her role. But Mr. Ito's idea was to create another role for another character to hate Gamera. So I thought the concept needed Ayako too. So if Ayako disappeared, the story would be unfair to Gamera. That was my opinion, but I battled with the producers. With those kind of things, the story is a little confusing. In the end, I wrote the story." Despite the conflicts, the film pushed forward with its most complex story yet. Visually, the film was a technical leap. Shinji Higuchi's team designed Iris as a sleek, alien-like being with tentacles and bladed arms, animated through a mix of suits, puppetry, and CGI. When Gamera 3 premiered in 1999, it sold around 1 million tickets. Fewer than Legion, but it was met with overwhelming critical acclaim. Japanese critics hailed it as one of the best films of the year, while Western reviewers would later rank it among the finest kaiju movies ever made. The Japan Times praised its emotional weight and awesome battle scenes, and Variety even compared it favorably to the original Godzilla film from 1954. The film brought Kaneko's trilogy to a devastating close, cementing his reputation as one of Japan's top genre filmmakers and earning him the opportunity to direct Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Internationally, though, Revenge of Iris toured film festivals and redefined what a monster movie could convey on a thematic and emotional level. At its core, Gamera 3 was a reckoning, a final confrontation between humanity and the destructive force it once hailed as its savior. Two years after the Legion crisis, swarms of Gyaos begin appearing across the globe, mutating faster than ever. During a catastrophic clash in Tokyo's Shibuya district, Gamera destroys the Gyaos but kills thousands in the process, prompting officials to label him as an enemy. In the rural countryside, an orphan named Ayana discovers a mysterious egg that hatches into a creature that she names Iris, which she raises to avenge her parents' deaths that were caused by Gamera. Iris grows monstrous and rampages through Kyoto, where it battles Gamera in a devastating fight. Gamera rescues Ayana and obliterates Iris. Gamera 3, Revenge of Iris immediately feels different from the rest of the trilogy. The tone is colder, the energy is heavier, and the story is far more personal. From its first moments, the film carries an atmosphere of dread. Every frame feels burdened by grief, resentment, and exhaustion. The world presented here is one that has already suffered greatly, and the people living in it reflect that pain. This shift in mood gives the movie a very haunting quality that makes you reconsider prior events. The story builds itself around emotions that are rarely explored in kaiju cinema. Grief and anger and teenage angst drive nearly every character decision, while fear and guilt shape how the world reacts to Gamera's existence. Cities still bear the scars of his battles, and the public no longer views him as a savior. The destruction that once symbolized protection now feels like collateral damage. Unnecessary collateral damage. And it's that change in perception that turns the narrative inward, forcing the audience to confront what heroism costs when entire populations are caught in the crossfire and brutally killed in the process. The tone fits the late 1990s climate of anxiety and uncertainty in Japan, where social unease and institutional fatigue had become part of everyday life. In fact, that was kind of just the 90s in general. In America here, you had Nirvana and The Matrix, and, this vibe of, man, I really don't want to live this comfy 9-to-5 where I can afford a home. I'm going insane. Office space. I hate having a comfortable job. Gamera 3 has often been described as one of the best kaiju movies ever made, and I completely understand why. It's so ambitious in scope, and it's rich in atmosphere. The cinematography, the special effects, the emotional performances give it a weight that few genre films can ever match. The craft on display is undeniable. However, I still find Gamera 1 and Gamera 2 to be the stronger films. Gamera 2 specifically captured a perfect rhythm between horror, awe, and scale. Even Guardian of the Universe feels more balanced and purposeful in its structure. Those two movies stand as benchmarks for what modern tokusatsu storytelling can achieve. That doesn't mean I outright hate Gamera 3, and it definitely doesn't mean that Revenge of Iris fails to impress. It remains a powerful conclusion, filled with a lot of striking imagery and genuine emotion. The direction here is really bold. There are a ton of risks taken, and the writing treats its characters with a maturity that just deepens the trilogy story. Like I said before, every film in this trilogy feels distinct, yet all three share a very consistent vision and thematic backbone. And even with my presence for the earlier entries, I still see this trilogy as the greatest achievement in kaiju filmmaking. Revenge of Iris might be my least favorite of the three, but it completes the story with gravity and conviction. It doesn't try to Rise of Skywalker its way through an ending. It sticks to its guns, and I gotta respect it for that. The special effects here are so impressive. I would say maybe the most impressive in the entire genre. The miniature work, the lighting, the practical pyrotechnics, they all carry this sense of scale that feels monumental. This is an event film. It's a once-in-a-lifetime release. The blend of physical and digital effects gives the film a very distinct texture that feels alive. I know some people don't feel the same way and they really hate the CGI, but to me, I think it works for the most part. Does it get a bit reliant on it? Sure, but as a whole, looking at the big picture, I don't mind it all that much. The film looks expensive, but more importantly, it's believable. The destruction scenes throughout carry an intensity that borders on horror. The chaos feels physical and the loss of life is never softened. Civilians die on screen, and the devastation unfolds with an unflinching eye. Smoke pours through collapsing streets, debris scatters across crowds, and fire spreads through buildings with terrifying realism. The violence carries emotional weight as opposed to just being mindless spectacle. The sound design and framing hold long enough for the audience to process the aftermath. It's these moments that give the film a heavy emotional center and reflect the story's fixation on grief and guilt. Iris is probably one of the most striking kaiju ever designed. The creature's appearance and abilities define the tone of this entry. Its parasitic nature, where it drains the life force from human hosts, adds a layer of body horror that just deepens the film's atmosphere. The way Iris extends its tendrils, envelops its victims, and absorbs them into its core feels ritualistic. The concept ties directly into the story's themes of obsession and vengeance. Iris becomes a mirror of human emotion, growing stronger through hatred and fear. It's that detail that turns it into one of the most fascinating antagonists in the entire series. One of the strongest story beats that this film has going for it is the relationship between Iris and Ayana. To me, I viewed this relationship as being a commentary on how people can turn to negative influences like drugs or alcohol when dealing with immense grief, with Iris being that thematic representation of how far off the deep end someone can go in that regard. However, Shusuke Kaneko has a much different take on this, and given that he is quite literally the director, I think his admittedly bizarre explanation goes a long way. Let's get into it. Quote, "When you set out to create science fiction, you're basically presenting something that doesn't exist in the real world. As you pursue that, and as you look into the various aspects of their qualities, that's sort of a byproduct of what happens when you begin to pursue something and really look into the depths of something that just doesn't really exist. It's just the way things turned out. I wanted to present an adolescent story in a kaiju movie. The girl in Gamera 3 and Iris made love, but I wanted to portray a relationship between the girl and Iris that is more spiritual. The more I wanted to depict the spiritual, the more it became ambiguous. So that's my idea of how it became ambiguous. Big monsters destroying buildings was always erotic for boys. Not big monsters, but Dracula and the Wolfman are more erotic for ladies. But big monsters are not much for girls." End quote. What the fuck are you talking about, dude? On the surface, this is a really bizarre comment, but I think I understand where he's coming from. The line about monster destruction being erotic for boys sounds ridiculous on its face, but it actually tracks with how Kaneko viewed kaiju cinema as a kind of power fantasy. I don't think he's actually talking about literal sexuality so much as the rush that comes from watching pure uncontrollable force. The act of a giant creature leveling a city appeals to the same intangible instincts that make war movies or superhero stories exciting. It's an exaggerated display of power that lets the viewer feel momentarily unstoppable. When Kaneko contrasts this with how women find the more human monsters like Dracula or the Wolfman appealing, he's really talking about the emotional conduit of that fantasy. For boys, it's domination and scale. For girls, it's intimacy and transformation. What makes the quote interesting, though, is that he's self-aware enough to laugh about it. He recognizes that his own work, especially Gamera 3, channels that same childlike and adolescent thrill, but tries to refine it into something more spiritual and introspective. The destruction still hits that primal part of the audience's monkey brain Neanderthal, I need to see explosions and shit, but the emotions behind it with the grief, the guilt, connection, belong to a different, more mature wavelength. And obviously I'm not saying to understand Gamera 3 you have to have a very high IQ. No, don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is there's more nuance to this than, say, I don't know, Gamera vs. Virus.
私はどんなことをしてもガメラを殺す。
Visually, Iris feels like an alien creation sculpted from myth. The design's combination of these elegant lines and organic fluidity gives it a real haunting grace. Its glowing blue core and intricate anatomy create an image that feels ceremonial and otherworldly. The creature's posture and proportions make it feel larger than life even before it moves. The design shares this bold imagination of something that you might see in something like Power Rangers or Super Sentai, yet it fits seamlessly within the darker tone of Gamera 3. It's theatrical without ever becoming cartoonish. There's also a distinctly phallic quality to Iris that feeds into the film's larger ideas about power and control. The tendrils that lash out and pierce its victims resemble both weapons and extensions of desire, violent, invasive, and commanding. The body itself is sleek and muscular, with a symmetry that suggests both strength and sensuality. It's not erotic in a literal sense, like I don't look at this thing and get a boner, but it carries the energy of something born from instinct as opposed to logic. As a result, that design choice reinforces how Iris represents the darker urges buried beneath Ayana's grief. The monster embodies the loss of restraint, the point where emotion turns destructive and consumes everything around it. In that sense, the phallic imagery becomes an expression of corrupted power, an exaggerated reflection of how easily pain can transform into domination when left unchecked. Gamera's redesign complements that contrast perfectly. His appearance is sharper and heavier, as if he's aged between films. The smoother features from Guardian of the Universe have been replaced with jagged armor and harsher lines. His expression carries exhaustion, and his shell appears scarred from years of battle. The design communicates resilience and sacrifice. Gamera feels less like a protector on a pedestal and more like a soldier who has endured way too much. The visual language of the suit reflects the trilogy's progression from optimism to decay. I also think that the story's handling of Gamera's reputation among humanity adds another layer of tension in a really unique way. The public now sees him as a destroyer, and the film commits to exploring that perception. Flashbacks to Guardian of the Universe show his earlier battles from civilian perspectives, reframing what once looked heroic as being just pure devastation. Those sequences really deepen the world building, and it makes the trilogy feel interconnected. However, the emotional shift from Attack of Legion to this entry feels very abrupt. It feels like we're watching Gamera 4 and not Gamera 3. Like, Gamera 3 should have shown this progression a little bit more naturally, and then Gamera 4 is Revenge of Iris, where we get this completely uninterrupted view of an evil Gamera. Even with that minor issue that I have, the film closes the trilogy with a sense of finality. Despite the cliffhanger ending, every thread from the previous entries converges here, bringing Gamera's journey to a bittersweet end. The tone feels mature and reflective. It has this sense of closure as opposed to a sense of triumph. The trilogy resolves itself with precision, each film leading naturally into the next while evolving in scope and emotion. There's this weird attitude I've seen online from some of the hardcore Gamera fans where it comes off like they outright hate this trilogy due to how much love it gets compared to the rest of the franchise. I've seen people claim that the Showa era deserves more love, and that this 90s trilogy has somehow overshadowed them to the point of being mainstream. Ooh. It's become this bizarre badge of honor among some corners of the fandom to reject the Heisei trilogy as if enjoying them makes you less of a real Gamera fan, because everyone else already loves those movies. To me, that argument just completely misses the point, and all it really does is just harm the overall reputation of every Gamera movie as a whole. When you look at the Showa films in context, they were fun and charming for their time, but they were also completely directionless. The repetition is undeniable. Every entry followed a very familiar rhythm. A new monster appears, a few kids stumble into danger, and Gamera swoops in to save the day. That formula works for young kids in the 1960s, but it needs to evolve. And it just never did. The later installments were pretty much just stitched together with stock footage and television level budgets, showing just how little creative energy was left. They have camp appeal, sure, but they offer nothing to analyze beyond surface level enjoyment. They were mostly made just to make money. And that's it. No one involved was really invested in telling a compelling story with interesting themes or to push the medium of tokusatsu forward. They didn't care about that stuff. In the same vein as Troma or Roger Corman, they just wanted to push a movie out and make money. And there's nothing wrong with that if the movie's entertaining, which those were. But the Heisei Trilogy, on the other hand, presents actual artistic growth. Guardian of the Universe established a story rooted in mythology. Attack of Legion expanded the stakes to a sci-fi planetary scale, and Revenge of Iris closed it all with a dark, introspective finale. Each film operates with its own distinct tone and visual identity, giving audiences a full range of cinematic experiences, from hopeful to tragic, from action-heavy to deeply emotional. There's variety, and more importantly, intention. Director Shusuke Kaneko treated Gamera as a serious dramatic property, not a kid's mascot, and it shows in the layered writing and the world building that feels genuinely lived in. The biggest reason why this film outshines the Showa era comes down to craftsmanship. Kazunori Ito's scripts are filled with purpose, creating characters who actually react to the consequences of their world rather than serving as background noise for monster fights. Shinji Higuchi's effects team, meanwhile, pushed suitmation and miniature work to their limit. It was artistry on a level that Daiei could only dream of in the 1960s. To me, the resentment that some fans hold toward this trilogy feels like a refusal to admit that the franchise evolved. Nostalgia can blind people into thinking that the cheapness and the absurdity of the Showa era define Gamera's true spirit, but the Heisei Trilogy legitimizes Gamera's legacy. It proves that Gamera could exist outside of children's matinee cinema and stand proudly next to Godzilla as serious science fiction. The difference is night and day, and pretending otherwise does a disservice to what Kaneko and his team achieved. I'm not saying this to put down the Showa films, or to make fun of anyone that enjoys those movies. I like a lot of them myself, but I just think that this trilogy is streets ahead.
Pierce, stop trying to coin the phrase streets ahead. Trying? Coined and minted.
But also, if you can look at Gamera vs. Virus and unironically tell me that it's better than Gamera 2, you deserve to be executed via firing squad. More than 25 years later, the Gamera trilogy of the 90s remains one of the greatest achievements in kaiju cinema. It was a bold, underdog effort, a smaller studio taking on Toho, a director fighting for creative control, and a team blending old-school craftsmanship with modern CGI to prove that monster movies could be serious, ambitious filmmaking. Gamera Guardian of the Universe and Gamera 2 Attack of Legion earned major critical awards in Japan, breaking through long-held stigma around the genre. Their success even pushed Toho to try to improve their own Godzilla films, with many fans noting how Gamera felt fresher and more daring by comparison. When people talk about the greatest film trilogies of all time, you often hear the same couple titles get thrown around. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Cars. However, I would go as far as to say that the Kaneko Gamera trilogy should, could, and would absolutely be up there with those classics as one of the greatest film trilogies of all time. And with all of that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You are watching Firewood Media. This is part 9 of my massive Gamera retrospective project. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this insane journey. I know this was a long one. I wanted to just cover the whole trilogy in one big video as opposed to, dedicating one video to each movie. This felt like the best way to go about it. Gamera the Brave and Gamera Rebirth will be covered shortly. I really want to get this series finished before the end of the year. That would be perfect. So we'll see what happens. There's also some new Gamera news that just came out where apparently they're making a new movie. We'll see what happens there. There's a lot going on. I'm also finishing up the Godzilla Heisei retrospectives as well. I'm hoping to have those done by January. It's a lot right now, but I'm about to go film the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 video right after I'm done recording this. Just one after the other. The grind doesn't stop.
Yes! Yes!
I just released a new short film. It's called Shadows. It'll be linked right here up on screen. Go and check that out. I'm really proud of how that turned out. Big thank you to our channel members for making videos like these possible. Their names are listed right up here on screen. For $1.99 a month, the executive producer tier gives you loyalty badges, custom emoji, early access to new videos, just like this one, exclusive members-only content, and occasional shoutouts. You also get your name in the credits of every film project and original video that I make, because if you're supporting it, you're producing it. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.